My name's Rich Wood, and this is the Shopsmith Mark V. And before we start out here, if you don't mind, I'd like to do a little selling of our company before we start operating the equipment. First of all, Shopsmith has recognized long ago that a lot of the people who have been master craftsmen, we've already sold our equipment. And many of the people who are now interested in woodworking are people who want to learn. Where are they going to go to learn? For that reason, long ago, we started opening stores across the country, and we now have many of them at various locations. One of them is right up here in Forest Park. Every new Shopsmith owner gets to go to school to learn how to use the Shopsmith Mark V. So that's nice. This is worthless unless you have the knowledge to be able to use it, and no tool is any good unless you have that ability. Secondly, we not only guarantee our equipment commercially and unconditionally, we also guarantee the results of our equipment. We have virtually thousands and thousands of plans at Shopsmith, but these 12 are very special. They're award-winning heirloom project study courses, and each new Shopsmith owner gets to pick one of those out to go with their equipment as standard, and we guarantee them that they'll build that piece to their own liking, or they don't have to keep Shopsmith. It's that simple. So it kind of eliminates a lot of the, I guess, the nervousness involved when you have to put out good money for woodworking equipment. Okay, now I'm going to kind of chew you guys out just a little bit, too, before we start out here. A lot of you come out here to these demonstrations to learn, and that's fine, but you plan on setting up a shop as you go. Maybe you have a table saw, a radial arm saw now, or some sort of saw, and then, like next year for Christmas, you plan to ask real hard for your wood lathe. Then the year after that, you want to get your drill press. And the following year, you're going to ask for your sander for Christmas. And the year after that, you're going to get your bandsaw. And the year after that, you're going to get your shaper, and on and on and on. It doesn't work that way. We've been at this game a long, long time. It takes a lot of tools to be a woodworker, and a Shopsmith Mark V is the 5 tools that you need most in a wood shop, like your table saw, your sander, boring machine, the drill press, and the lathe. But when you think about these projects up here, these all take a minimum of 5 different major power tools to complete, and most of those take 7. Now, there's no way in the world that you're going to tell me that you can saw all these boards for this entertainment center this year and save them till next year when you can sand them, and save them till the following year when you can bore the dowel holes, and the following year, and the following year, and the following year. So woodworking is something that you need to commit to. Either stay out of it or get into it. And we feel like we have the most economical way to do that. Okay. When you go to the classes, you're going to learn how to operate the Shopsmith Mark V and do lathe turning and the things that you need to get started off on the right foot. Now, lathe turning is one area that our new owners feel like they need help in when they start out. Let me just make a suggestion on a lathe. Whether it's ours or any others, when you buy a lathe, try and stay away from those that have belts and pulleys out here where you have to change speeds by changing pulleys, because the fact is it's too inconvenient and you won't do that. There are other variable speed wood lathes. They're generally a little bit more expensive, but they're well worth it, where you can turn the dial like this to change speeds. And the first place you'll find that they're worth it is when you're learning. It's a scary thing when you first start out on the lathe. If you're not frightened the first time you put a chisel into a piece of wood that's going that fast, you'll be the first one. When you go through the schools, the first thing that we teach our owners is that speed really doesn't make a lot of difference on the lathe, other than that it will just take a little longer to complete the piece. So why not slow that down and relax so that you can really enjoy what you're doing instead of being all uptight and worrying about the wood flying out there. You don't ever have to worry about that on the Shopsmith. But just remember, I'm going to go fast here so we can get done quickly, but you can do the same thing at a slow speed. Okay, the first part of wood turning is very simple. It doesn't take a lot of skill. You simply move the chisel back and forth and bump the edges off of the wood. Now, if you listen real close, I think you'll be able to tell when the wood becomes round. Because it gets real quiet. Hear that? That's probably round. The way we can tell for sure is just put a chisel on top, and if it bounces, then we know we've got at least one flat side there. That's in pretty good shape. Okay, we're going to see if you qualify to own a Shopsmith here. What's the easiest way to smooth a piece of wood? Say sandpaper. You qualify. The same way on the lathe. The easiest way is simply take a sheet of sandpaper and fold it in half, hold it there, and of course reduce the speed a little bit so it doesn't overheat the sandpaper. That's the easiest way. What we're going to show you here is really neat, at least I think so. There were wood lathes 2,000 years ago, but there was no sandpaper, and this is how they smoothed the wood way back then. This is called shearing, like shearing a sheep. And this isn't even taught at the university level any longer, but we teach this to all new Shopsmith owners. And the secret to shearing is having good sharp chisels and holding your mouth just right. Notice that mouth position. So sandpaper or shear, either way. Now you can be as fancy as you like on a lathe, and there isn't a lot that you have to learn as far as designs. There are only two shapes. One of those is called a bead, it's a hill, and the other one is the opposite. To make a bead, you start with the chisel flat and simply stand it up. See how that rolls an edge? It's called a half bead. Turn the chisel over and do the same thing on the other side. And you've probably seen that hundreds of times, the knob on the end of a baseball bat or furniture or whatever. I don't think you'll find this in any book, but if you have a lot of beads in a row that you'd like to make, it's really best if you go one way with your chisel and then turn around to go back, because you kind of get in the groove and you're able to do a little bit nicer job. Okay, those are beads. The other cut is just the opposite of that. It's called a cove. I got to do my fancy thing here first. The reason that this chisel is curved is so you can use it as a scooper. And the way we try to teach people to use this is just pretend that you're rowing a boat. This is a little oar. Just row the boat. That's called a half cove. You turn the chisel over and row the boat again. And you've got two half coves there. And we'll put a half cove out here. Now you can also make a cove like this, just that straight in motion. And if you want it bigger, just wiggle the chisel. That's scraping, and that's a little rougher, and you may have to sand some, but either way is fine. And you might want to even combine the two, you know, scrape and then do some shearing. I think if you start to look at lathes about the same way you do an automobile with respect to speeds, they start to make a little bit more sense. You wouldn't want to go around a real sharp curve at a high speed in a car. You're likely to have an accident. And the same is true on a lathe. If you want to do something delicate, it's nice to be able to turn the speed down. And this is one example where I don't think you'd ever shut the lathe off and change the belt. This is a real delicate cut here. You like that? If you've gone through these large home shows and seen these model homes that they have built right inside buildings a lot of times, all the real nice homes anymore don't have the old brass doorknobs on them. They have oak or walnut doorknobs. Very expensive item, but I want to show you how to make knobs or handles here. And they're really easy. You can do this yourself. If you're making doorknobs, of course, you make a lot of them on a long piece and then just saw them off. All a knob is, it's just a half of a bead where we round off a square shoulder here. There's a huge built-in safety feature with every variable speed wood lathe. And I mentioned it earlier. Once again, you can turn this entire piece on a Shopsmith without ever having to worry about the wood flying out of there, and that's very comforting to a lot of people. And I use it as a real safe way to go back in with my chisel, and I can finish shaping the round part of the knob, and it saves about a half a day with sandpaper. trying to do that. I got a little finish sanding normally to do, but not very much. Now this may not seem like much to you, or it may seem like magic, I don't know, but what this really is, it's every cut that exists on a wood lathe. This is called a half cove. This is a full cove here. This is just half of that. 2 beads or hills and a half of a bead. And you think about it a second. It isn't any shape on a piece of wood either a hill or a valley, and however you want to put it together. And we've got brand new Shopsmith owners in about 2 hours' time at their initial training classes that go with the Mark V. We've got them doing a pretty darn good job of making their beads and coves and so that they can enjoy their lathe. Maybe not wooden rings and things like that, but enough that you can really have fun. She lost her first tooth yet? Yeah? She's going to need this the next time she loses a tooth. Next time you lose a tooth, you put the tooth under the pillow and the good fairy comes, right? And then she puts money under there. Well, when you do that, put the tooth under the pillow, and right before you go to bed, spin this magic ring. You hear that sound? That's a magic sound. And the good fairy will hear that, and she'll come and put money under there. But you know how sometimes she forgets or she gets too busy? If that happens, the very next night, you sit down on your floor and do like this for a long time. And I bet you she shows up then. There's your very first good fairy caller. Keep that, Dad. She'll like that. So that's why people work with wood right there. It's very, very enjoyable time, and it's time well spent. But a Shopsmith is a neat lathe. I don't know if any of you have seen on this old house when they built the deck on the back when Norm was using our wood lathe with the duplicator. This is a duplicate of that spindle that they used on the back of that deck, and it was gorgeous when it was done. But I generally keep this to show people how large a piece you can turn on a lathe. But if you look at this spindle, this is nothing more than just the hills and valleys like we talked about before. But anyway, Shopsmith is large enough in length that you can make furniture and do all sorts of things around the house, and baseball bats, etc. One of the nicest things about this lathe, and then you're kind of getting into art, I think, there are a lot of people anymore that are getting into bowl turning. And that's really neat. Every magazine you pick up anymore has some sort of article on making bowls on a wood lathe. I don't know if any of you live on a farm or anything like that, but most people that cut firewood, they leave the stumps in the ground. And if you know a farmer, or just drive out into the country someplace, you can go out there and they'll let you take a big pick of some sort and get those stumps out of there for nothing. They'd love to get rid of them. And take a chainsaw and cut those into squares, and it makes the most beautiful bowl for bowls that you've ever seen. And it's free, so you might want to consider that. However, whenever you see a lathe advertised in the magazines, it always has like 10-inch or 12-inch SD. Now that's swing diameter is what that means, and most of your wood lathes are 10 or 12 inches. Here's a 10-inch saw blade. A Shopsmith's the biggest one you can get. It's 16.5 inches, and that lets you do a lot of things, making even tabletops or lazy Susans or larger projects, and large bowls for that matter. And it's very easy to work on a Shopsmith because it turns into a beautiful bowl turning lathe, and they're very expensive. Very difficult to make a bowl on a lathe when you have to bend over the bed to work like this. Now, the reason a lot of people, the last time they ever make a bowls in junior high shop classes is pretty obvious. You better be 13 years old if you're going to stay bent over the bed of a lathe for 4 or 5 hours. And for that reason, they've always made special lathes for bowl turning. Very expensive. However, a Shopsmith owner has one of those right here. You can put the tool rest in the end, slide the whole piece right on down, and lock it in place, and pretty soon you'll find out that you're sitting on a stool making your bowls and having a good time at it. So it's a great lathe right there, and I think most people in the woodworking industry will agree that Shopsmith is one of the finest wood lathes anyway. But, of course, this is a lot more than a lathe. This is a complete workshop. And one of the problems we have as a company is we're on TV anymore a lot. We've gotten to be so large that a lot of people will see us on This Old House or the New Yankee Workshop or something like that. And the trouble with that is they never show a Shopsmith being changed from one tool to the next. It's always just set up as a saw or a drill press. So generally, the first question we're asked by people who have never been to a live demonstration before, like you, is how much trouble is it to turn a Shopsmith into a tool? It's very simple. In fact, this is the hardest thing to do on a Shopsmith, is turn it into a saw. You have to put your saw blade on, And you have to add the table. And what we've got here then is an excellent 10-inch cabinet saw. All your cabinet saws today are 10 inches, they're called, and that's simply the diameter of the saw blade, and ours is no exception to that, this way. However, the way a Shopsmith is built here, it will allow us to saw somewhat thicker boards than other 10-inch saws. Our depth is 3 1/4 inches, and most are around 2 1/2, and that's important, especially this time of the year, because a lot of people are thinking about outdoor projects like decks and gazebos and patios, and all the corner posts are 3 inches by 3 inches. Well, if you have a great big long 3-inch by 3-inch board, it's heavy. It's very difficult, if you don't saw all the way through the board, to back that out and flop it over and try to match the saw cut up. So it's nice to be able to get all the way through it. Otherwise, generally, you have to take out a handsaw and do it, and there goes the accuracy of your saw cut. So the piece doesn't, the deck doesn't look as nice. We've become very popular also over the years with contractors for a number of reasons. This is all commercially rated equipment, but one of the, and especially since we've come out with the 510 model over here several years ago, but probably the biggest single factor that people who work on their homes and fix up and build houses enjoy a Shopsmith is because we have a huge rip capacity here. This is double what other saws are. Most saws are only half of 50 inches or half of 48, and this is for a reason. You know, when you're fixing up your basement, you're going to be sawing 4x8 sheets of paneling. If you want to fix a hole in the roof, you're going to be sawing a 4x8 sheet of plywood. 4x8 sheets are what homes are built of. And if you think about 8 feet long, that's 96 inches. So with 50 inches here, you have the ability to saw through that, right through the middle. And then, of course, we can slide the saw anywhere in between. We can simply adjust the size of the saw table to match the size piece that we're working on, so it's real flexible. In all honesty, though, we've got over 1 million Mark V owners these days, and the one suggestion that we've heard over the years, and this hasn't changed in over 38 years now, the Mark V hasn't, our owners always told us if they could change one thing, what they would like to see different, they would like to see us have a larger saw table. And we did that. That's the difference here. It's hard to look at the 510 model and the 500 model and tell the difference, but let me take the rip fence off of here, and you'll be able to see this, I believe, a little bit better. The 510 has a much larger table this way and this way, as you can see here by the rip fence. But if you count them, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 tables on the 510 model instead of 2. And that is nice also because most people are working by themselves on a Shopsmith. And when they stand right here, working with any long, heavy material or a 4x8 sheet, you have no support or help out on this end. So you have to have someone help you hold the boards. Of course, the 510 model has the expandable wings on it, and they're similar to, if you go to a cabinet shop, they'll have a large table saw and a big table built around that. And this is the same thing, only it's portable. And you can use that, as you see, with a long outfeed table or put the wings to the side, so it's very flexible also. This one's a little bit nicer saw, and it's also a little bit more expensive. The 510 model is $18.99, and the 500 model is $15.99. But to be honest with you, most of our sales are the 510, and it's well worth the extra money. But it depends. They're both nice units. It depends on what you want to do. Now, you know, when we talk about how Shopsmith is the best buy by far in the world in power tools, I mean, it replaces over $4,000 of comparable quality equipment. It's not cheap, but it beats the heck out of the alternatives. When we talk about that, when we send our owners to school to learn to use the equipment so that they're comfortable, and you feel almost like a part of the family as soon as you walk into the stores there, to be honest with you. It's like a home away from home for Shopsmith owners. And we also guarantee our new owners that they'll build that piece so that they're satisfied or they don't have to keep a Shopsmith. Why is it that every single one of you don't sit down after this demonstration and order a Shopsmith Mark V? I think I know why. It's the fear of power tools, and saws in particular. You may be interested in knowing that Shopsmith Incorporated is the only tool company in history to ever receive the National Safety Council's highest award, and you don't receive that award without just cause. Good example of things that we do that no one else does. No one else provides its owners with a complete safety kit but Shopsmith. including, first of all, this is called a push block, which holds wide boards down on the sawing surface to keep your hands, see your hands are never near the tools working on a Shopsmith. This keeps your hands safe when working with big material, and you can buy these in hardware stores for $8 or $9. Probably the handiest safety device ever invented was a push stick, and that goes with every Shopsmith. And there's a subject that no other tool salesman but Shopsmith salesman will touch. Let's say that you pick the oak swing up here. You see those slats in the swing? They're very thin. Tell me how you would safely rip thin pieces like this or work with small material on a saw. See, no one but Shopsmith has anything at all that will help. And this is a dandy. This is called a fence straddler. And it adjusts here for the thickness of the material. It has a lip on the back so that when you need thin pieces, you can very safely saw those without your hands being near the blade as well. And there's no more of this stuff of pushing the board up by hand when you're ripping against the rip fence and through the saw blade, two ways at once. For many years, good woodworkers have been making feather boards out of wood and using C-clamps. And they're a little bit awkward to use, but this one's neat because it has an expandable bar. It fits right there on the saw. You push the board real tight up against the fence with these spring fingers and lock the feather board in place. And those fingers also prevent kickback. So we Shopsmith owners, when we're sawing, we're standing over here in the safety zone feeding our lumber in, and then when we get to the end of the board is when we pick up one of the other items and finish the cut. And you don't have to buy those extra. Those are all built right into the standard pricing of a Shopsmith Mark V. And also eye protection as well in the form of safety goggles. The truth of the matter is, on a saw, most of the time we're not ripping, we're cross-cutting, you know, for angles and things like that, with the possible exception of saw guards. What I'd like to show you here is the top advancement in safety and power tools in the last 50 years, and this has helped to make us famous. This is our miter gauge safety grip clamp, and it's a dandy. This is a mechanical clamp. And let me show you how woodworkers probably right this very minute all over the country are working with wood, and you be the judge as to the method that you would prefer to use. On a table saw, what you generally have to do is hold your material real tight up against the miter gauge by hand. And then you do all sorts of things to keep your hands safe, like this. But you never work that way on a Shopsmith. By mechanical clamp, what we mean is that when you apply 20 pounds of pressure back here on this trigger, you're going to get 5 times as much, or 100 pounds under this post. And that gives you the obvious safety advantage, but you're going to have to trust me on this. Half of safety in a wood shop is controlling your lumber. And that's what the safety grip gives you, is excellent control. And this almost eliminates the need for a radial arm saw in a shop as well. In fact, there aren't too many radial arm saw manufacturers left anymore. They're kind of gone by the wayside. But there's one thing that's difficult to do on a table saw, and that is to take a very thick, wide, heavy board and hold it by hand up against a little miter gauge on a table saw and cross-cut it accurately. The one thing that a radial arm saw does well, a large board just lays there and you draw the blade through. Well, of course, that's a $400 or $500 minimum investment in a workshop, and this safety grip will clamp down the large boards so that you have the other hand free to guide those through the blade, and so you've eliminated the need for a very expensive tool there. But this was a device for safety. That's what it's for. And as a result of the clamping pressure, you ought to see what a Shopsmith does. There isn't a saw that will outsaw a Shopsmith for precision and angles. And this is a very special saw. All the owner's manuals, the textbook, and all the classes that come with the Shopsmith, we teach various angle settings for different shapes and things like that. And our saw is special in that we can preset those angles. There's a positive stop plunger here, and if you notice, we don't even have to look here. That's 49 degrees on the miter gauge, and the table at 21 degrees. And I preset those. So consequently, if you're in a business, if you want to start a small business and there's an angle that you use a lot, you don't have to constantly reset up your angles and come back next week and make test cuts all over again, or fixing up the house or whatever it may be. Okay, what you're looking at here is the hardest cut to make on a saw. It's a double angle cut. And I imagine most everybody here is the same as me. You know, you have to justify things anymore. Will a Shopsmith pay for itself, either in monetary return or in the simple enjoyment that you get from working with wood, or in some regard? And everybody's like that. And that's what we hope to do with this one cut. I know you can't see it here, but the speed dial on a Shopsmith is all marked in words, so you can't make an error on your speeds either. And watch where my hands are. We've got some very sharp people that work at Shopsmith, and our marketing department gives us all these facts and figures to work with. They tell us that over half of you standing here at this demonstration have spent more money on wrenches to work on your car than you put into power tools to take care of your own home. And think about that. Isn't there something wrong with that somehow? Better Homes and Gardens has stated time and time again that the average home in the United States is increased in resale value by over $2,500 when you put simple crown molding up around the ceilings of your home to make it pretty. And you can do that yourself. You don't have to pay somebody $50 an hour to come out and do that sort of work. And of course, we have a 100 and some page catalog that goes out to our owners every 3 months called the Shopsmith Wish Book. But one of the items in there that we sell is called a molding cutter that fits right in here, and you put various shapes and pretty designs on the board. And this cut, of course, is not just a crown molding cut. It's the shadow box picture frame cut like you see over here, which is a very nice project to do yourself and hang on the wall because everybody sees it immediately. But if you can find another saw that will make this cut every time like a Shopsmith, buy the saw. But been around saws all my life, never seen one that'll do what a Shopsmith does. Now remember, it takes a lot of tools to be a woodworker. Here's where we need another one, and this is kind of interesting. When you look at the grain of the board, what this is really little tiny tubes that carried water up to the leaves of the tree. If you saw across those tubes, doesn't it make sense that they're like little tiny open straws up here? If you tried to put wet glue on this joint the way this is right now, what do you suppose is going to happen to the majority of your glue? Exactly, it'll soak down in there like a sponge, and it makes what's known as a dry joint. It's very weak, and it will break apart. You don't even have to bump this. It'll just break apart with changes in the atmospheric pressure and that. So if you want this to last, you're going to need to seal this. There's only one way that we can properly seal a piece of wood, and that's by sanding it, and that's one of the uses for a disc sander. Now, there are other good tools on the marketplace. We're well aware of that. But right here is where every one of you are actually going to get to see with your own eyes where Shopsmith has had them all beat, pretty much hands down, for the last 45 years. Even if you have what's considered to be your dream workshop, with the best table saw money can buy out in the middle of that shop, and you got the best sanders right in this corner, and the best drill press over here, and the best wood lathe, and the best bandsaw, and the best of everything you ever dreamed of having. Let me ask you a question. After you saw this board on that saw, don't you now have to turn around and walk over here to a sander to work, or over here to a drill press to work, or go somewhere else to work? And once you get there, aren't you now faced with the prospect that somehow you have to try to perfectly duplicate the angle that you used on your saw? That's impossible. No one's perfect just with one angle, let alone having two of them. Watch. Now, I'm also going to try to settle this darn 45-year-old dispute that we've had. It's been going on between Shopsmith owners and non-Shopsmith owners for all these years. We love having Shopsmith owners like this gentleman come out to the show. They're our best salespeople, and they bring pictures with them and show us what they're building on their Mark V, and they say nothing but good things, like never knew how fast I could work with wood, and never knew how much I could enjoy it until I owned a Shopsmith. The other fellows come out, and I guess nobody likes to admit that they made a mistake. So, they started collecting tools years ago, and they have nothing good to say about the Shopsmith. They say I'd never have a Shopsmith because you have to fiddle with it. You have to change it from one tool to the next. I'm kind of going to warn you here. We don't take that anymore. If you're standing out there on your saw, you're now going to turn around and walk over here to your sander, okay? Which you're doing right now. You see, the only difference is on a Shopsmith, you don't have to walk anywhere. But you still have to change. It doesn't matter what the shop situation. Do you follow what we're saying here? Now, you're walking over to your sander right now. And now you're standing in front of your disc sander. So the truth of the matter is the Shopsmith isn't any faster, nor is it any slower with respect to change over time. It's about the same. But where we save our owners just a tremendous amount of time. And really the heart of woodworking is right here if you think about it. This is what people work all of their lives to get better and better at. It's in setups. It doesn't take this Shopsmith owner 2 hours to build some sort of a fixture out of wood for his drill press that will come close to duplicating these angles, or his sander, or whatever tool. On a Shopsmith, it's built right in. And not only is it built in, it's perfect. And then forgive me, but you can have 50 years experience in every good tool that was ever made. You will never do the quality of workmanship that I've seen coming from Shopsmith owners in the last 14 years I've done this job. And it's not because of skill level, it's because of this. If you've ever heard the term, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, this is the best example of where this is actually seen that I've ever heard of. Now, disc sanders are very, very important tools, but even my Shopsmith owners don't fully understand what all they can be used for. Granted, we'll use these to seal off end grain for proper glue joints, but that's a little tiny part of what they do. They're actually an extension of a table saw. My dad's a cabinet maker. He's a perfectionist. And when my dad wants me to saw a board, he'll say something like, "Rich, saw me a piece of oak 7/13/16 inches long." And the last thing you'll hear my dad say is always one of three things. Leave it, take it with you, or split it. Anybody raised around a cabinet maker know what he's referring to? Nobody? You do? What? Great, the pencil line. Now, granted, if you're going to build one of the outdoor barns in your backyard to store your lawnmower, you don't have to be that precise. But if you'd like to do this type of work for a set of kitchen cabinets or furniture building, that's how precise you have to be to make things fit. And the fact is, nobody's that good with a saw. So how do you do that? Proper way is whenever you saw the board, always saw it so you can still see the pencil line, and then you use your sander. You sand right to the edge of the line or right to the middle of it, or so it just disappears, and that's how you make things fit. Plus, they save you a fortune because you're not perfect. This picture frame, for example, if you set up a saw with your angles on it and you saw all the corners out, and you put your corners together, you may have a little gap showing in that last corner. And that's because you're not perfect on your angle here. Well, if this is walnut or cherry like this is, it's not cheap. What are you going to do, throw it away? Of course not. You're going to change the angle on your sander, and it saves the project. So you've, in essence, saved money with your disc sander. So they're very, very important tools. But they're also the most difficult tool to use in woodworking, much harder than a lathe, because you're forced to hand feed the board into a sander. It's difficult to maintain the angles, and then the sander will grab the board and it will do all sorts of bad things. So hard to use. And you got to watch, or when it kicks out, you could sand a little knuckle here also. I think it was last July, Wood Magazine called this disc sander the best and safest disc sander in the whole country at any price. And that takes in a lot of territory because this is a commercially rated tool here. And if you think about commercial sanders, well, you can get up into the thousands just for those. That's quite a statement for a company like Wood Magazine to say. Anyway, remember, your hands are never near the tools working on a Shopsmith. Beat your hearts out when you see this. That's a quill food disc sander. See, you don't have to move the board any longer. Have any of you sanded a piece of oak and had the end of the oak burn, and then you swear it's because your sandpaper is of poor quality? That's not the case. The speed is too high for hard materials like oak or anything else. Sanders are made to sand pine or cedar. So at the same time you're burning the oak, you're also burning the sandpaper, and it melts the glue that holds the grit on there, and you've just ruined $2 worth of sandpaper. The sandpaper isn't cheap. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to slow the speed down so that you can work with harder woods without having to replace the sandpaper every time you turn around? So it saves you a lot of money there. And this is why people like a Shopsmith. If you notice how smooth that is for glue and how crisp and clean the edges are. So not only does the project last longer, but it looks nicer as well when you've done things right. How many of you own a shop full of tools but no Shopsmith in there with it? 4 of you. Great. You guys are our best prospects for Shopsmith ownership. Nearly half of the people that buy Shopsmith already have a shop full of tools. And there has to be some sort of reason for that, wouldn't you think? There's one real good reason, and I'll show you what it is. It's called a horizontal boring machine. Now, I don't know too many of you that are going to go rushing right out this afternoon and spend But the cheapest one I've ever seen was $1,695 in last year's New Mexico Tool Company catalog for Christmas. And they're generally a lot more than that, but that was the cheapest, $1,695. Hardly anybody going to spend that kind of money for a piece of equipment that does one thing. But that's basically what they do, is one thing. The one thing they do is the hardest thing to do in woodworking, and that's edge glue. See, sooner or later, unless you're just going to make birdhouses and jewelry boxes and small things, which there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I make a lot of bluebird houses myself. But if you're going to make anything larger, like cabinets or tables, sooner or later, you're going to have to learn how to put your lumber together edge to edge to make bigger surfaces. And you can't just smear wet glue on here and clamp the boards, because glue is real slick. The boards squish around, and you end up with all sorts of problems. So we need to stop that movement somehow in here. And the trick is to come up with a smooth surface when we're done. Must be a half a dozen different things we can try to do in here, but there's only one right way. The best analogy I think I can make is the way they built barns 200 years ago. And the Amish still do. They don't use nails or bolts or any type of metal like that. They'll bore a hole and drive a wooden peg or a pin in between the boards to hold them together. You know why they do that? It's because wood expands and contracts so much that as it expands and contracts, it'll split apart and split apart and split apart from the nail, a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, until finally, over the years, the barn falls apart a lot faster than a barn that's held together with a wooden peg that expands and contracts with those two pieces. Does that make sense? So the barn lasts a lot longer. And that's not just true with barns. That's anything. Always has been, always will be. The best way to put the boards together is like my little footstool here. Is to pin it. Those are dowel pins. And that's also the hardest way. It's very difficult to dowel boards together and come up with a smooth surface here. Well, the way they teach you to do this in shop class is one of two ways. It takes a long time, it's very tedious. You can either measure right to the center of the edge of all the boards and draw all the lines and all that, and then measure the distance in between the holes on all the edges. About a week after you start measuring, you get to drill the first dowel hole. Or the second step is you can use these, they're called doweling jigs, which are, if you don't know what they are, they're like small clamps that will fit over the edge of the board, and it just measures for you. It finds the center of the edge, and it's got holes where you drill under a drill press. The problem with doweling jigs, to be honest with you, is that they work. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. They'll find the center of every edge of every board that you're going to work with. What's wrong with this picture? Say they're not the same thickness. You never have been able to buy two boards that are the same thickness, but it's worse today than it ever has been. This cherry hope chest, I built that for my oldest daughter for Christmas last year. I think I had $94 in the cherry in that, which, you know, granted, for what you end up with, that's not a lot, but for what that's worth. But still, the point is, hardwoods are not inexpensive. When you go out to buy your lumber, let me try, and we carry a nice selection up at the store, by the way. When you buy your lumber, I strongly suggest that you take a scale or something that you can measure the thickness of the boards from one end to the other. Because I find so many of them today that will vary by as much as 1/8 of an inch from one end to the other, and that board is absolutely useless. Don't buy it. But if you can get this under a 16th, let's say a 32nd, buy that board, because that's as close as you're going to get. Anyway, if you put the centers of different thickness lumber together, it's obvious what you have. You have a huge scraping or sanding job to get this smooth, and it just destroys the fun of the whole project, and the belt sander will actually ruin the craftsmanship of the project. So this is kind of where people drop by the wayside. This is the big hump that you have to get over. Watch, there's a right way to do this. Long time ago, they figured out that hardly ever in woodworking do you bore holes in the surface of the wood. About 15% of the time is all. Most of the time, 85% of the time, you're drilling your holes either in the edge or the end of your boards. Now, go out and price a set of solid hardwood kitchen cabinets. It'll floor you what they cost. The average will run you $10,000 or $15,000. And why is that? When that's about $700 or $800 worth of hardwoods, and it's nothing but a big rectangular box. And in cabinet making, these are called rails and these are called stiles. You just put stiles and rails together like this. That goes on the front of the big box for the facings of the cabinets. And then put drawers and doors in there. Why such a big cost difference? Problems, that's why. How are you going to put stiles and rails together? Biscuit joiner? Biscuits are not designed to work on end grain. They'll split apart real easy. Plus, they're too wide for stiles and rails anyway. And try to put a little portable biscuit joiner over the end of a board. It just won't work. We've got a nice biscuit joiner for a Shopsmith, as a matter of fact. But biscuits are out for that work. Second option is they don't make tall drill presses like that. That's out. I hope you don't think you're going to be able to dowel by hand and do the job. That's out. You have two options left. One way that you could do this, and it's a good way, but for 99.9% of the people that watch our demonstrations, you're not going to be this skillful. You have to have a lot of skill to do what's called a mortise and tenon joint, which is a square hole in here, and you put a square tenon that fits into that. But you're going to have to be good to do that. So that's out for most everybody. Now you're down to one option. You're going to take this solid cherry out to your garage where you've got a nice, great big flat surface to work on, concrete surface. You're going to put the cherry down on the floor, hold it or clamp it together like this, and you're going to grab your box of those corrugated fasteners. Whack! No way you're going to do that. Fact is, you're not likely to ever do this type of work unless you own a boring machine, you see. That's what they're for. The board lays down flat, so it's very stable. You have no size problems because the lumber is going out this way. Even if you're working in the corner of a garage, you can always open up a door and let the big part hang out. So you can do that. And it's easy to get to the end of the piece when you're doing your stile and rail work. And the same is true for edge gluing. It's very stable when you can lay the board down on the big side. But the neat part of any boring machine is pretty simple. You no longer have to have a whole heck of a lot of skill to do a good job with your doweling because you no longer have to measure. So you can bore dowel holes now wherever you want to. I'll drill these way off center just to prove the point to you here. Now pick out the pretty sides of your boards. If you want to build cabinets, it would be the outside of your cabinet panels that you want everyone to see, or the top of a table that everybody's going to see when they sit around it. Take a pencil and mark all the pieces in some way so you can tell one side from the other. But you always want to mark them on the back so you can just erase these and forget about them instead of having to sand out pencil marks. Keep the pretty sides down when you're boring. And I doubt very seriously if you're ever going to work with these two different thicknesses of board. That's kind of ridiculous. But even if you did, the purpose of a horizontal boring machine is that they completely compensate for any differences in the thickness of your material. Because once you bore the dowel holes and you match these pieces up, shake your head real big if you understand. If not, I got to go over this whole boring machine thing again, and I don't think your feet can take that. Anyway, you look at me and you say, well, this guy is a salesman. How important is that? Really? I'll tell you how important it is. You go to any antique store that you'd like and pick out any antique table in it and run your hand along the bottom and see if they aren't all uneven and rough. And the same with an old cupboard door. And that's why. It's because it didn't make it to be an antique unless it was doweled together. And back to the original point, at full retail price, it's cheaper for the four of you standing here that have a shop full of tools. It's cheaper at $15.99, and we've got a great sale in addition to that. It's cheaper to buy a Shopsmith that has a boring machine in it and get the whole shop thrown in basically for free than it is to run out and spend $1,700, $1,800, $1,900 for just a horizontal boring machine. So a lot of people that have shops already have Shopsmith as well. Most good drilling tools will have some sort of a gauge that will determine the depth of the hole that you'd like to drill. And ours is very convenient to use. It's round. Dial in the depth of the hole. There's 1 inch, and that hole will be 1 inch. And this is a small board, but you'll still get the general idea as to how easy it is to control the piece when it's laying on the big side. Are there any Americans here? Couple of you? I see 2, 3, quite a few. That's great. There are 5 real big boys in the major full-line stationary power tool business in the United States. I think Delta's first in sales. Shopsmith's third, I know that. Guess which one of them is the only one by law that's allowed to put that little sign up there in the upper right-hand corner. See that? Shopsmith. And we're from Dayton, Ohio. We haven't gone overseas. We're right up the road here. And if you want to talk about quality from the United States, anytime, any place, with anyone. Now, that's the kind of quality we've given our owners for the last 45 years. And you got to understand now, remember, this is nothing but a piece of metal. And without the knowledge or the education to know how to use this is worthless. But you get to go to school to learn how to use a Shopsmith. If you have the knowledge to use good, well-built equipment that gives you precision, you're going to get an accurate hole. But this is still nothing. without the knowledge to use good equipment to give you the accurate hole, what's going to suffer? You see how woodworking makes a big cycle? If you break that cycle anywhere along the line, the project suffers. Doesn't matter to me what you guys do for a living. I mean, we sell doctors, we sell truck drivers, we sell unemployed people. If you make one nice piece that goes to your grandkids someday, guess what else you are? You're a craftsman. I've got, see this walnut cradle? I've got one. I have 3 girls. I've got one at home that puts that one to shame. Hand-turned spindles. My oldest girl just graduated from college this year. I've got one of those at home that all 3 of my daughters have slept in, and I get a smile about yay big whenever I think of what kind of fight there'll be over that someday. So that's the kick I get from working with wood. Anyway, this boring machine is a great tool. It's not the answer to everything. It will do the majority of your drilling, but how about this when you need to drill into the surface of a board, 15% of the time? Well, it'd be real tough to take that coat rack and put it up on edge and bore holes in a line, but when you can lay it down flat and come down from above, then you're okay. But you need a drill press to do that. A Shopsmith makes a great drill press, not just for wood, but for metals and plastics and everything, and this is my favorite part of the Shopsmith demonstration, has been always. It's kind of like you go to McDonald's and you get these little transformers that they give the kids. It's easy to turn a Shopsmith into a drill press. You just tilt the table and position it where you like it. It's a highly adjustable drill press. You ladies out there, we just got the figures on this last week. Over 17% of the people that go through our schools nationwide are ladies, and I think that's amazing. More and more women into woodworking, and children also. It's a good thing for the family to do, but they're generally shorter than men, and I'm short. If you're short, you can use this drill press down here and you're comfortable. Anthony Munoz was in here yesterday looking at a demonstration. Anthony Munoz is the tackle for the Bengals, and he's about 6'5" or 6", I believe. And I told him, you know, this is the only drill press I know of where somebody 6 feet 7 inches tall doesn't have to stoop over all the time to work on, so it's nice for tall or short. Most everybody uses it somewhere in here. I like it right about in there. Release the lock at the end. Bingo. And it's balanced, so it's easy to lift up there. It'll stay for temporary drilling. If you want, however, there's a simple thumb screw lock. Just lock it up in place. I almost hate to admit this. There's one drill press that's as good as a Shopsmith. I didn't say it was any better, but if any of you went through shop class in high school, it's the old line Powermatic that most high schools have, and it's a hunk of metal, been around forever, and it's a $1,500 drill press. But that one and this one are the only two that in order to change speeds, you don't have to take a pan off of here, a belt cover, and stand there and look buggy-eyed at a little diagram. If you want to put your belts in between here, you get this speed and that speed. That one and this one are the only two where you can stand there and do that. And that's what makes a Shopsmith a Shopsmith. Now, granted, I'm a hayseed. I live on a farm, and I don't know if any of you are from farm backgrounds, but believe me, there are no unintelligent farmers left where I live. They're all farming big farms, and they're good business people. Most of them are millionaires, at least on paper, and I don't know one of those guys that owns 20 different tractors. It makes absolutely no sense. First of all, it costs way too much, and there's no storage space, and then you have to take care of all that equipment. Does this remind you of anything? Like maybe a tractor for woodworkers, and you can put attachments on there that are far less costly. A really good example. See these raised panels on the entertainment center here? Everybody thinks that's so difficult to make raised panels. That's a piece of cake. Out of our catalog, $12, and you put a Shopsmith router chuck on here. Makes an excellent router, and it's 4 passes. Zip on the end grain, zip on the end grain, the 2 sides, zip and zip, and you've got your raised panel. For $12. It's because you don't constantly have to be buying another tractor and that. Now, we only accept one excuse around these demonstrations for not ordering a Shopsmith, because they're always the best buy that there is nationwide at a demonstration. And I'm going to tell you what that excuse is so you can use it on me. The one excuse we accept: she'll kill me. We take that. All the rest of them we don't. Don't walk up, please, and say, I just can't swing it. That's why I carry this little doodad around here, this shaker peg coat rack. Go to a craft show sometime. This mall probably has 2 craft shows a year. They're all over the country, every place you go. And it's people like you and me. They rent out a spot like this for about $25, and it's a fun weekend. But every time you go to these things, you'll find a bunch of people making those shaker peg coat racks and selling them out of oak for $15 or $20 like they're going out of style. I mean, you see people walking up and down the halls. You know what this is? That's about $1 worth of oak. Those shaker pegs you buy pre-made, I buy them from Trendlines Magazine because I can get them bulk. I buy 100 at a time, and they're $20. It's 20 cents a piece. All that is 5 holes drilled in a straight line. You know, we can give you a lot of things. We can give you the best of equipment for the best pricing. We can send you to school to learn how to use it. We can even tell you to build a piece of your very own, and if you're not satisfied with it, send the equipment back. We can do all that. The one thing that we cannot do is we cannot give you the simple initiative that it takes to get out in the workshop, if you have to, for 1 single hour each month and set that hour aside and say, this is my hour I'm going to use to pay for my Shopsmith. I bet you in an hour you can whip out 10 of these. Don't get greedy. You know, don't put $20 on them like everybody else. Put 10. See how long they last. I bet you wish you'd made 100 of them, and you may end up doing that. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to get rich working in wood, but if you want to add some extra money to your household, I can tell you one sure way of doing that, and that is to make something out of wood and do it right. Okay, I want to show you one last thing on the drill press because it's the nicest thing that I've ever seen a drill press do. This is even nicer to me than not having to change belts and pulleys. Watch what happens when I raise this handle here. This is called an indexing table. That is the nicest thing that I've ever seen on a drill press. And if you don't know why that's nice, see, normally on a drill press you don't even get a straight edge. And this is another good example of the holes are greater than the sum of its parts in the case of the Shopsmith. But here it's self-aligned. But what you would normally have to do is loosen a C-clamp that's holding a piece of angle iron or a board on there for your straight edge and move that over to get the bit close to where you want to drill. And then retighten the C-clamp. It's real awkward to do that. The indexing table allows you to just lickety-split. Be perfect. And use the same gauge over here as we did on the boring machine to dial in the depth. And there you go. You get my point about the $50 a month on the Shopsmith charge, and that's without a penny down. I know there's special circumstances, but for the most part, everyone can well afford a Shopsmith. So if you don't want one, just say she'll kill me, and that'll be okay. Well, that's it. That's all standard equipment. That's a Shopsmith Mark V. Everything that I've shown you here, with the exception of the brad point doweling bits, which are extra, the 3-step cam-operated casters on the bottom of the equipment to give us a portable workshop that we use to move the machinery in and out, those are not standard, and that's a real popular item as well, I might add. And also our lathe chisels don't come with the machine standard. We don't make our own chisels. Buck Brothers Knife Company has made our chisels for 40-some years. They just put our name on it, and that's another old American company too. Anyway, everything else is standard, including the complete safety kit, the textbook, the owner's manual, the classes, the study course for one of these projects that you'll build, and also an additional study course so that if you're unable to attend the classes, this is basically the same thing. You can do this at home, and it's nice to brush up also. That goes with the Shopsmith for $15.99, or the 510 model over here is $18.99. Whenever we come out to these demonstrations, we always have the best pricing in the company, and that is no exception this time. Should you decide to order a Shopsmith during this show, and we're going to be here till 9 tonight and from noon till 5 tomorrow on Sunday, you're going to have the opportunity to own a Shopsmith at a great savings. Nationwide at the demonstrations, this is our summertime offer, and this is just kind of unheard of because most people are going to buy these anyway. We push the button on the computer and ask it to tell us what items new Shopsmith owners order from our catalogs. This is what it came out with. Carbide blades and plywood blades. Our lathe chisel sharpening guide, that's the secret to lathe turning. We do this every morning when we come into work, and to have the right angle and make sure your chisel's sharp. And you use that in conjunction with the aluminum oxide paper there to turn a Shopsmith into a tool grinder. Hardly anyone ever has enough clamps to use in a shop, and there's some nice clamps there. Drum sanding, all your layout and measuring equipment is there. It's just a real nice way to start up a professional wood shop. That goes absolutely free with every Shopsmith that is ordered here at the show. That's part one. Part two is that you get to take an additional $100 off the cost of either machine in order to pay for the lumber of the first project. You see, we want you to build a nice piece and have it no matter what you decide to do later on with the machinery. So that's quite a savings. That complete package, this one's $14.99 through Sunday, and that's $17.99. You can use any of the major credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, cash or check, or the Shopsmith charge that we mentioned, and that basically works the same as a MasterCard, and it's about $50 per month. That's okay. Now, I mentioned the attachments. We are just as proud of that little $12 router chuck that makes this into a router as we are this machine, because it's just a Shopsmith product, and you can add virtually anything that you would like. This bandsaw has been a very popular item for over 35 years. If you notice, you don't need any additional space in a wood shop. However, you have to figure that you're going to have your Mark V all of your life. Now you may not mind lifting 37 pounds, putting on the end of the machinery. 35 years from now, you may not want to do that. You may not feel like it. And for that reason, we have always had the separate stands and motors for these attachments that you can add later. But this is a great way to start out right here. Now, just like a tractor, a Shopsmith has a power takeoff on the end, and we hook these attachments up with it's a very strong nylon axle. I've used one of those for 15 years, if you're wondering how long they last. I hope it goes another 15. Think about this, though. When we hook the bandsaw up, what we actually have here, isn't it now a 2-horsepower, variable speed, industrially rated bandsaw? Go down to Mueller's and check the price on one of those this afternoon. They'll knock your socks off. They'll run you at least $1,100, $1,200, I can assure you, and probably more. You know what our bandsaw costs as an attachment? $419. And that's because you don't have to buy another tractor to run it, basically. But you can run down to Sears and you can pick up a bandsaw, non-commercial, for about the same price with a separate stand on it. So people will say, well, what's the difference between commercial tools, non-commercial tools? It's all on the inside and how it's built and what they do and how long they're meant to last. And I can't stand up here for a half hour and bore everybody with all those particulars. But I think there's one thing that kind of illustrates how commercial equipment, in particular Shopsmith, is built to take abuse. And you really don't want to do this on a bandsaw. Even a Shopsmith bandsaw is not good to do it with, but watch this. I'd have just broken 5 bandsaw blades on any other bandsaw I've ever seen. So, you know, it's built to take the abuse. Kind of neat. We teach this in our classes also. This is a type of sawing on the bandsaw called compound sawing. And a lot of people ask us how these Queen Anne style furniture legs are built. You can do this with any 3-dimensional and symmetrical shape. You really need a pattern to do it properly, and of course I'm not much of an artist, as you can see here, but just make your cut on one side and do about the same thing on the adjacent side. Then when you get rid of the scrap, always in the middle, what you end up with is the magic of woodworking. Now, what's the only excuse we accept for not buying a Shopsmith here at these shows? She'll kill me, right? I always pick one guy out that I think falls into that category, and I ask him to do what any self-respecting male will do. This is for you, pal. Get down on your hands and knees and beg. Say, please let me get a Shopsmith Mark V. Yeah. Oh, you got one already. Well, beg for another one. Anyway, it's a whole lot of... I want to do one more thing on the bandsaw here. Well, I've been trying for 13 years to get a round of applause on this last cut, and I haven't made it yet, but get ready, I got a feeling this time. A bandsaw will let you do 2 things. You can make gun racks and whales. Oh, I had to beg for it. It's even got a spout. One clap does not a round make anyway. I guess I'll keep it in there anyway. Who's got a 5 or 6 year old granddaughter, daughter, son? Crayon holder. They like little. Here you go. There you go. 3-year-old? 2 crayons fit there, and they just love those little whales. Anyway, that's a Shopsmith. Now, thank you for attending the demonstration. We've got a brochure here that I'd like for you to pick up. I'm going to ask every single one of you to order a Shopsmith before we leave this show, because it's a good buy and it's an excellent time to take advantage of the sale here at the shopping mall. But don't worry about it, and don't get the guilts on me. That's one thing that we really have a hard time with is, you know, you guys, a lot of people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on boats and things where they can have their little space out on the water. How many of you have a place of your own where you can go? Like just a corner of a garage or someplace where you've got that radio tuned to your own station and all that. But you get the guilts because you say, this is for me. You know, $1,500. Listen, maybe the machinery is. You're going to be using it. But what about the rocking horse? You going to be the one that's sitting there rocking on the rocking horse? Of course not. The entertainment center, you're certainly going to make everybody leave the room while you watch TV on it. The deck that you build on the back of the house, there's no way that you're going to sit up there and have a cookout and have everybody else sitting on the ground. You see? So just try it out, and it's your loved ones that benefit from this whole woodworking game, and we think that it'll work out well for you. In any case, look at the warranty information on the back, and of course our sale is in, information is in here, the complete package, the money off, and like every other company, the more you buy, the more you save, and we have various packages set up to help you out. Once again, my name is Rich Wood, and my partner is Dick Rhodes. We're from the factory in Dayton. We're going to be here taking orders for the next day and a half. And I'd like to say one thing in closing. My grandfather told me that the hours you spend fishing and working with wood are not subtracted from your life. So what I'm going to tell you here is if you buy a Shopsmith, you'll live longer. How's that for a sales pitch? Please order a Shopsmith and help yourself. Thank you. Fire away with any questions you may have. And if you'd like your woodworking book, we sure do have those for you over here in the box. And if you don't have the coupon from the newspaper or the mailer, simply fill one of these cards out and we'll get you your woodworking book.
When will you be having a lathe demonstration?
Very shortly, we're going to have another lathe turning demonstration. Mm-hmm.